Leetcode add two numbers today. Try to see how fast we can do it. I'm going to try to explain it at the same time. All right, so let's start over. Basically, you have two linked lists, L1 and L2. Your goal is to add both lists and then return that output. So how are you going to do this is by adding each element within each list and then outputting that into a new list. So we do that by doing answer equals a new list node, a new list. We need something to refer to the position in that. So let's just call that current for now. And then we also need to take into account that some numbers are going to be above when added together. The sum is going to be greater than 10, or 9, I mean. So we need to take into account the carry. For example, in this input, a 4 plus 6 is going to get a 10. But you see how the output is a 0 here? That means that the output was actually a 10, but then they carried the 1 to the next element, which would be 3 plus 4 is 7, plus 1 is 8. So we need to have a while loop that causes certain conditions, checks for certain conditions, I mean. So whilst our lists are not empty, so while L1 or L2 or our carry is not empty, we're going to assign certain variables. So let's do v1 equals L1 dot value. So what we're doing right here is we're assigning the element in list 1 in that current loop to v1. So for example, L1 in the first loop is 2. L1 in the second loop is 4, and so on. So what this does is it gets the current element and assigns it to the variable. We're going to do that. But this won't actually work because it needs to have a logical if statement. So if L1 is not empty, else we would return a 0. And this is going to make sense of why we're doing else 0 later, because it would just return a 0. Let's take, for example, in this one, L1 has more elements in its node, in its list, than L2. Therefore, you would just be adding a 0, and it wouldn't really affect the sum, the total sum, but it would still allow the loop to continue going through L1 if it's bigger than L2. So now that we have assigned variables, we can now perform the actual sum. We're going to store that in a variable called val. So that's v1 plus v2 plus our carry. But we need a way to determine carry. So we do this by doing a floor division. We take our val, we divide it by 10, which would give us the remainder. In our case of 4 plus 6, that's a 10. So this would come out to a 1. But we also need a way to determine the actual value. And we would get that answer by doing the mod. So it'd be of mod 10. And that would give us the specific digit that we're looking for in the loop. We need a way to add this value that we have created, that we've added, we've summed together, we've calculated, excuse me, and we need to put it into we need to add it to our list. So we do that by referring to our current, which is the copy referencing to their answer, current.next equals list node, and then in that we're storing our value. So I just noticed I didn't even put the timer, but it's okay. And now the next part is because we've calculated and because we've added that to our node, we need the loop to now move to the next element, the next node in the list. So we do that by first redirecting our current to now refer to current.next. So we're shifting our current to the next position in the node. We're going to do the same thing for L1 and L2. So for L1, its new position would be L1.next if L1 is not empty. Else, we're going to return a none. In this case, we can't do a 0 because then the loop would never break. So we need to return a none because there's not a next node. L2 equals none. And this is pretty much it. Now we just need to return our list. But remember, this is a tricky part, that our answer still has a dummy node. So if we were to return answer, it would return the entire list, including a 0 at the beginning, because it was an empty dummy node. So we need to make sure that we're returning back our list including at the correct position where the actual calculation started. So basically index 1 of our loop, which would be next. And if we submit that, oops, missed a equal. Come on, Leetcode. And that's fully accepted. Okay, interesting. Let's submit. That fully accepts and beats 7.9. This varies. Sometimes like beats 30%, 40%. I don't know why it changed so much, but that's add two numbers Leetcode.